Oh, tonight what I'd like to do, we usually have a closing meditation. So tonight what I'd like to do is what we do on the phone. I do a 72227 meditation.
Rob?
And I'd like to do sound to participate in it.
Okay. First, we'll open the floor to anybody that's got a question on the book.
Okay.
You know, when my grandmother was in hospice, she said to my father, she said, "It's really wonderful." She says, "Heaven isn't what you think it is." She says, "It's all different levels, and we go to our own level."
Yeah. Exactly, that's what I was...
She was a devout, Baptist all her life.
Well, I was confirmed as a Lutheran. I didn't know anything about levels. When I got there and found out that, there's different vibrational levels, I didn't feel too good on the first or second or third, but when I actually got to meet the entity that the master teacher we call Christ, he was on the one called Medius. It's in the medium somewhere. And I tried my best arguing with him that, I don't need to go back down there. But it was as though he said to me, everything I needed to know, telepathic transfer was a wave of a hand. And I understood a lot of what I needed to do. And the first thing he wanted me to do was go back to what they call my review. So at one of the levels, I'm reviewing not just my life, but I'm reviewing any life I was interested in. The ones that were come to mind were the ones that are affecting more than him now. And I remember a little bit about those lives coming back, but what they said is not important, really, your past lives. What is important is what you do with this life. Because this, if you knew and remembered everything from every life you've had, we would not function. We would be completely dysfunctional. Because there'd be so much hurt, sorrow, shame, pity, agony, and things that we don't need to carry with us. So, in a sense, we're veiled when we come back here, and we don't know about past lives. We just think it's a myth. Any other questions?
What about, are there past, is everything happening all at one time, or is there a time distinction in?
Well, that's what's interesting is you can go back and forward in time, in the afterlife. And in here, we see things as linear, but it's really not. It's circular. But still, we see our life as sort of linear. And the thing that Einstein came up with is that time has no relevance. And I wouldn't say that it doesn't have no relevance. I think there's a better term out there, and we haven't figured out what that is. Because there is some relativity in time, but we don't know to what degree the time is relative.
So it's not happening simultaneously?
It can be. Because from what they told me, that your soul has many spirits, and you can be sending out 2 or 3 different spirits at the same time. True. And you might be having existence in another dimension, in another planet. We don't know these things until we die and go back to our soul. At that time, I found out I had 3, and that's average. There are people with 10. And that's a little out of the norm, I think. When Christ once said in the Bible, we only have one life to live, he's talking about your spirit. Yeah, this is the life that's important. This is the one we got to focus on. And if there's another spirit out of your same soul, maybe that spirit is right now being Adolf Hitler. I don't know, but you hope not.
So, no.
But he was never really given...
I got confused just now. So you're saying that the spirit only understands one dimension, but the soul that you are a spark of
is multidimensional.
Is multidimensional. So, because I have distinct understanding and memories of my multidimensionality. So.
And our soul is multidimensional. If you're connecting to your soul, and there is a way to do this, and some people have better abilities than others in connecting back to their soul and realizing who we are. For the part, I understood a lot about past lives, and I saw a few of my own when I returned back to my soul. But you know, the life I have to live now is the one I need to focus on, and I don't think I have a lot of control over what other parts of my soul are doing in another place. But I sometimes sense that something's going on.
I would agree with that.
And we are multidimensional because we have a soul and it's in another dimension already.
Mhm.
And in fact, we don't choose the same dimension every time. We can choose any dimension to live in. When in here, it's a little confusing because there's 13 dimensions, but we only really live in 12. The 13th is really all the things that the Master Creator uses to create all the things that you see.
Mhm.
So we don't really experience a lifetime there, but they thought it was important to mention that there was that dimension.
Just to answer the question you asked about time, I don't think David ever asked that question when he was over on the other side, or really spent a lot of time asking his guides in this lifetime either. So I don't know if you've ever gotten an answer for how time is, you know, or all lifetimes happen at the same time.
Again, they have talked about it, but in terms I didn't really comprehend quite. What I do comprehend is that time in our galaxy and our solar system is picking up speed. And because of it, we're experiencing a little shift in how long the days are, but the minutes still appear to be the same, so it's just an illusion. Rob, you had a question?
Yeah, you mentioned that we used to practice guitar a lot, and then after your near-death experience, you stopped entirely.
No.
Have you ever considered going back and possibly getting your chops back?
Well, I did, when I was about, I think it was 1999, I started to have some regrets because I was in an accident where a truck backed into me and I pinched my arm on, just about completely clipped it off. And I thought to myself, I never really did anything with my musical talents. And by that time I was playing piano and I was singing and stuff. So when I came back at 17, I joined a group and I played a variety of instruments. At that point, bass, and I played piano, and I eventually became the lead singer for a group, a rock and roll group. And we played more popular music, and it wasn't the screaming, hard rock or anything like that. We played stuff that was on the radio. They called popular music. And when I cut my arm off, I promised that I would do something with my music, and I did. And I cut 5 CDs now. I've got 4 instrumental and 1 vocal. And what I did with those, I spent a good year of my life learning to play, the acoustic guitar, which I thought had a lot more, vibrational, therapeutic sounds. And I learned to play a different style. And suddenly I was learning to use all the fingers and use all the picking fingers. So I became proficient. And within the last 2 years, I haven't really had a whole lot of time to play the guitar. So I'm back at the musical end of it again, and just haven't spent the kind of time that I'd like.
So David, why don't you tell people that don't know you what you do, what kind of work you do with your channeling and healing abilities and stuff?
Yes, when I was 10 years old, that's when I first discovered I had some extraordinary healing abilities that didn't match up with the average thing. So it's not like a Reiki process or anything. What it is, it's they're sending energy through me. And one time I met at university, and because I had done some extraordinary healings, a group of university professors that had gotten together and they studied the paranormal. I couldn't believe it. They travel all over to different universities and they do remote viewing, if you've ever heard of that.
Mm-hmm.
And they do astral travel, and there were some that were very proficient at that. It was just stunning to see some of the examples. And they asked me to come in and do a demonstration on electrodes. So I'd held one electrode in one hand and one in another, and the average person puts out 2 to 3 millivolts out, and I was in that same range. But then I told the professors, I said, well, but now the guides will come through me, and the needle's buried, which they thought was impossible. But there was so much energy flowing through my hands. But that's not me, that's my guide. So I'm a facilitator in healing, and that's the type of healing work I do. It's hands-on, but I also learned to do sort of a remote healing process where you think about, what you would be doing if you were there. And then Jacqueline and I both have this computer program. It's really nice. It's got a lot of electronic gadgetry, but what I like about the program is it kind of gets me focused on something for 1 to 3 minutes, and then I can send frequency that's more specific to the person's needs. And so I use this remote healing technique for about 90% of the people I work on. So I am busy, usually, sitting at a desk in front of a computer and sending healing to people who report back to me the next day that they've never felt better in their life. So, and when I can be hands-on, then I go in person. But Rob.
Do you think, is it possible when you're doing, or when you're doing the treatment, the healing treatment, that you can access to a deeper level if you use perfect intervals or perfect vibration, even vibrations?
The vibrational part of the sound healing journey that I got involved in it was my first CD I produced. And what they did is they produced songs that were sort of interesting, but at the same time they had tones in there. And when we went to record them, we got done with, you do about 4 tracks you lay. And our engineer said, we're going to have to, it sounds great, but there's these noises and stuff and I can't get them out of it. You don't really hear them, he said, but they're in there, and I'm just afraid that, I said, oh, no, those are the triggers. Because when you erase all 4 or 5 of the tracks that we had cut, they were still there. So to the spirit world, this is child's play, to be able to put things in. So they did this intentionally, and they know the beats, they know where they need to be, and they also guided me to help produce the songs with a certain mathematical sequence to the notes. And if I did it wrong, they'd say, oh God, no, that's not going to work. That's going to create more trouble. So the songs were carefully thought through, and everything was done in like 3, 3, 3, 3s. And it's kind of interesting because that's the Christ number, and that's what he used for healing as well.
Okay, David, go ahead.
In observation, dealing with death and dying on a frequent basis, as I do, some people will go their entire life with blinders on because that's how they were taught. You can't look at something that's not, something that's abnormal or super, whatever, that doesn't exist in their minds. But when they get closer to the end, they have this almost like a euphoric, like your mother, that they wake up, they have an awakening, and they start to see all these different possibilities of things that are out there. And so it's kind of cool to observe individuals as they go through these final stages that, they missed all this their entire life, and they're just now coming into their space.
Our entire family of origin had an issue with fear of dying. And, I dealt with 3 basic fears when I was young. And that would, by the time I was 17, those 3 fears had escalated. And I had the fear of snakes, the fear of dying, and the fear of mother-in-laws. But the third one was a real deep set. No one came up. But the fear of dying is, there is no timing to where it's time that you've got to get busy. My father became quite, he always said he was an atheist until he saw some of the healings I started doing. And he really come full circle. Because if you can turn an atheist's mind around, I mean, you really, but I've had this argument with atheists before, and they say, well, you know, I've been dead and, you know, nothing out there. Well, they went into a coma, and that's still a conscious state, so your spirit doesn't even want the body. And in a coma state, your spirit is laying there, but it's dormant. You can still hear. You can still probably, you just can't communicate, you can't touch, you can't, your motor sensories aren't functioning. But you can hear people coming into the room, and you can probably somewhat see them even. So, you know, the fear of dying, people often get rid of that fear as they start to realize how peaceful it is, and sometimes it's up to the last few minutes of their life, and they're at peace with the whole thing. And I remember my grandfather saying to me many times that, you know, he admitted he was afraid of dying, but he said, I'm probably going to live to be 100. And when he was about 91 years old, he came to us the day before he died and said, I want to be buried in this suit, and, you know, I got all my well prepared, and I got this and that. And my mother said, well, why are you talking about such a morbid subject? I mean, you know, you're really healthy. And he said, well, you know, I could die tomorrow, and he did.
This is related to the person who was an atheist and they changed their mind after witnessing some of what you have done. Most of my entire childhood, I was raised a Baptist, but I believed things differently than what I was taught. I believed that there were things in this world that couldn't be explained just by science or just by religion. And it wasn't until I was 12 years old that I saw what I now know to be a spirit of death. And I wasn't afraid of it, I just witnessed it and knew that he was watching me. And from then on, I've been working with different things in my practices of Wicca to realize that all spirits, whether they are considered light or dark, are just that, spirits. And it's how we interact with them that determines how they touch our lives.
And people experience that in different ways. For instance, the spirit of death is one thing that's been reported. The death mask, have you ever heard of that? Where people look like they're about ready to die, and within a week they do. And the other one is the smell. There's a certain smell that sometimes people have just before they're ready to pass over. And it's a pungent odor, and you know it. So that we get different warning signs that this is about to occur. So, you know, and again, I have my perspective, and I'm not saying that I'm the all-knowing, all-truth understanding. I'm just saying that the book that I wrote is not my perspective, but was based on my perspective and what my guides explained to me that I was going through in better terms than I could. Okay. All right. One more question, then we got.
Okay. I was just going to ask if you could repeat Marcy's description of being with her father when he passed, because it was such a beautiful.
You know, a friend of ours had just talked about, she was in the company of her father just before he passed. And he woke up suddenly, and his eyes became large, and he saw something just beautiful, and he just reached out and he hugged it. And his eyes closed, and she just saw him. It was almost like she was seeing the white light tunnel that he was going right through it at that moment. So, you know, most doctors never see their patients die. Nurses do. And nurses report a lot of different similarities in their story, and I thought it was pretty unusual. But one last thing about the atheist. An atheist, I read and said, you're never going to change my mind, Father. I don't believe in anything, and I never will. And I said, but the belief in nothing is the belief in something. So how do you explain that one? You know? And my daughter is married to a guy who's trying to start an atheist church. But they don't know what he stands for. And it's quite amusing because they called me and asked me, well, what should our platform be? And I said, well, you have a very strong belief in something. He goes, no, you don't. And I said, yes, you do. You believe in nothing. And he goes, well, nothing can't be a platform. So he said, all we've ever done is have meetings and we argue over nothing.